My guest today on Naperville Real Talk is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and news broadcaster. You see him on the evening news on NBC Chicago. He is a husband, he's a father, he's a Naperville resident. He is an aviation enthusiast, and he's the son of legendary broadcaster Lester Holt. My guest today is Stefan Holt. On today's podcast, Stefan and I cover a wide range of topics, from what it's like in a daily basis in the newsroom, how they keep up with a fast-paced breaking news world, how do they stay accurate and as unbiased as possible. We also talk about the pressures of being a father, a husband, and what kind of a legacy that Stefan wants to leave. I'm so excited to present this episode to you. Stick around. All right. Well, welcome back to Naperville Real Talk with my guest, Stefan Holt from NBC News. Thank you so much for being here.
Chris, it's great to be here. This is awesome. Glad we could do this.
I appreciate it. Is it a little different for you to be on like the other side of the interview?
It is. You know, usually I'm the one asking the questions, so
Right.
Take it easy on me.
Absolutely. Well, what I did not want to do with this interview is sort of just rehash all your history. I think a lot of people know who you are, what you've done, what your family history is.
Sure.
I'd just like to get to know you a little bit more and kind of get to know the way you think. One thing that was kind of like burning on my mind as we came into this interview is I'm just totally ignorant on how the newsroom works.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might feel that way unless they're interested in it and they've done some digging. Would you walk us through what a day is like when you're planning out a broadcast, and particularly when it comes to maybe breaking news? Like, who makes the decisions on what runs, how much time is given to it, who's going to do the reporting in the field, that kind of thing?
I'm very lucky. I work with an amazing team, and it truly is a team sport. When you think of local news or even network news, you need people to bring in the information, to gather the content, to analyze that information, and then to figure out, okay, what's the most important thing? What's the information that our audience needs to know about? So if I take you through a typical day, first, it's important to point out it's a 24/7 operation.
Yeah.
There's always somebody in the newsroom on the assignment desk ready to answer the phone call or get the email that some sort of breaking news is going on. So all day long, someone's there. We have a morning meeting, usually around 8 o'clock in the morning, where we all get on Microsoft Teams, or we all gather in the newsroom, and we come together between the reporters, the anchors, the content producers who write a lot of our content, the platform managers who are stacking the shows, our executive producers. We have our news director and our VP of news. They all attend this meeting, and we just start throwing out ideas. Hey, what did we read in the paper this morning? What did we see on the Today Show? What might have happened the night before that was breaking news? It was on our 10 o'clock news. So we'll kind of throw those ideas out there. Some people will come to the table with what we'll call evergreen ideas, maybe a story that's not necessarily breaking that day, but it's a really interesting story. It has some really compelling characters and something that our audience might be interested in. So we'll come up with those ideas, and then we start making decisions of, okay, this story is going to go in the 4 o'clock news. This will go at 4:30. This will go at 5. This will go at 6. And it's funny because that's the plan. That's the idea that we have at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. By the time we get to 3:30, 3:45, most of that's out the window.
Yeah.
Because something has changed, because there's been a news conference that we didn't expect. There's a breaking story that happened. It really requires, sure, a lot of planning, but also flexibility and resilience, because those best laid plans can always go awry. And as mentioned, it's collaboration, because we all come to the table with different perspectives. You know, some of our team members live in the city, some of them live in the suburbs, some of them have families, some of them are single. So, we have all sorts of people from different backgrounds. That diversity really helps us to bring a lot of ideas to the table and make sure we reflect our diverse audience here in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah, I can imagine keeping up with today's events in this 24-hour news cycle is really fast-paced. What is it like incorporating, so you've got the traditional broadcasts, right? Mm-hmm. I've also seen, and maybe, I've seen some streaming things. I've seen like social media things. How does that all tie in? Are there elements that are sort of unofficial, or is everything that kind of comes out planned as best as possible?
We still call ourselves the TV industry.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, television and linear TV is still our bread and butter.
Sure.
But we're no longer just TV.
Yeah.
You're right. We're doing streaming. We're doing digital shorts on YouTube. We're doing podcasts, a lot of social media content, a lot of vertical video. That's the new way to try to capture audience, capture attention. So, I think we're trying to adapt to the new reality of how people consume information.
Yeah.
When I grew up, people would sit down on the couch after work, 5 o'clock, watch the news, watch Tom Brokaw, or in the morning they wake up and throw on the Today Show. It's not like that as much anymore. Sure, people still do that.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's still going to be our primary business. That's our primary calling, is putting out television. But, I think of myself as a busy parent, trying to get the kids to school on time, trying to get work done, trying to go live my life. It's nice to have things on demand on my schedule. So we're trying to adapt to that and not just reflect where the audience is today, but thinking about where they're going to be tomorrow, weeks from now, months from now, years from now. Try to figure out those platforms that people are starting to embrace more and more. It's tricky because sometimes you want to have everything nice and neat and know, okay, this is exactly what we need to do. The world isn't like that. As I mentioned with breaking news, we can have the best laid plans and we just have to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. And so that's part of what we're doing, is just trying to embrace all these new platforms so that we can really reach the audience where they are.
Is the majority of the material scripted, or is some of it you as a journalist kind of coming up with some things on the fly, or how's that work?
We try to script a lot of things, and part of that is for accuracy.
Sure.
If you think about journalism and just the whole primacy effect, the idea of the first thing you hear, you want it to be right.
Yeah.
You want it to be accurate. You really want to have the best information first. And if we start kind of freewheeling and ad-libbing, as we call it in the industry, you run the risk sometimes of not getting it right, or just riffing and then, I missed the most important point. So we try to keep things structured in that sense. So when you watch the news, you always see the headlines first, and you kind of get into the meat of the story as we go on through the newscast. There is an element of spontaneity. We're not robots reading the news. And fortunately for me, for job security, we don't have AI news anchors reading the news just yet. I mean, maybe that's on the way someday. But the whole idea of having someone who is conversational, is able to talk about what's going on from a human perspective. Yeah. I think that's really important. People can get the news from their phones, reading stories in the headlines, things like that. I still think there is value in having somebody who's a real human being, who has emotions, who has empathy and compassion, and can read those stories in a way that really connects and resonates with the audience. That, hey, I'm just like you. I'm a dad. Yeah. I'm a busy professional. I'm trying to help support my family and try to keep faith in the world when sometimes things are shaking and crazy and feel like they're out of control. We're all along that ride with you when you're watching.
Yeah, I feel like it helps engender trust, right? When it's a person that you can connect with. I wonder what you think if in the social media age where people have more access to you, right, as a journalist, I see you're on Instagram, and they probably feel more connected with you as a person, right? Like, hey, this is a guy that lives in my community. Whereas maybe in the past it was like, well, that's a guy that's on TV. He's a celebrity. Sure. Like, would you agree with that?
I think if you think of the traditional news anchorman from the 80s and the 90s, it was someone, I'm telling you the news. That's the way it is. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that the medium did very well back then in conveying information. Now, you're right. I think there's this expectation of, hey, I want to have a conversation with this person. I want to have connection. I want to have engagement. Yeah. We get instant feedback from our news stories now. If I make a mistake on the air, I have my email open while I'm on the set, or I have sometimes social media, and I'll know about it, seconds after I make the mistake. Or, if someone has something to add, say, hey, you know what, that happened to me too. A particular story we read, we get that instant feedback, and we can pivot. We can make changes and corrections. And sure, we never want to make a retraction, but I think, look, we do have moments where it's nice to have that feedback, because we can say, okay, well, maybe we should change this story to reflect a perspective or a point of view maybe we hadn't thought about in that morning meeting or when we were making our editorial decisions. Yeah,
on that. So I'm curious, can you think of, a specific story or maybe a time when you reported on something and then either learned new information or just through conversations with people kind of changed your perspective on it? Maybe even a total 180 flip from what you originally reported?
I think every story has been like that.
Yeah.
And part of that is coming into the storytelling process as much as you can with kind of a blank slate.
Yeah.
And that's hard because we all see the world through different perspectives.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for anybody, whether you're watching or even gathering the news. We all have our own backgrounds. And I've had plenty of stories where I thought, okay, this is this is the story. I'm kind of formulating how I'm going to write the script in my head. And then I start talking to people, and this is completely different. This is changed, or the information has developed. Unfortunately, we see that a lot in tragedy, and a lot of heartbreaking stories where we think, okay, this is the way something happened. What's coming to mind, unfortunately for me, is covering the mass shooting up in Highland Park, the 4th of July. As that story starts to develop, you start to realize the gravity of the situation, and you start to hear the heartbreaking stories, and it really affects you as a journalist. We're there trying to gather information and convey the story, but you also start to internalize a lot of those things, and I start thinking, okay, I'm a dad. I could have easily been here at a parade with my kids. You start to really put yourself in the shoes of the people you're talking with. And I think it's important because that's how you develop compassionate storytelling. Like I said, we don't want to be news robots. We have emotions, we have feelings. I think we're going to tell you the facts straight and tell you how it is, but I think it's important for storytellers and journalists to also just be able to feel the gravity of the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially if you're communicating to other humans, right, who are struggling with these same things, and they're looking to you because you ostensibly have early access to the situation or maybe insight that they wouldn't have. And so you're right, if you're not communicating it with the appropriate emotion, right, and actually experiencing it as a human yourself, helps you better communicate it. So you kind of touched on different perspectives, and this is not to be controversial, but a lot these days is made of news bias, right?
Sure.
And I mean, I think it's accurate to say, like you said, everyone has a different perspective. It could be political perspectives, it could be family. One person's single, one person's married. It could be religious backgrounds, where you live. All these different things, I would imagine, affect journalists just like they do anyone else. Talk a little bit about how do you do your best to bring your experience into it, which you have to, but also try to, as you say, bring it as a blank slate and try to. I guess the old sort of example I give is that a lot of people say, and I don't know if this is true or not. I have to go back and study old tape, but they would say, the old school newscasters would say, well, this side says this and their opponent said this, and they would kind of lay it out for you in this neutral way. Now, I don't know if that was ever actually true.
I don't know. Yeah.
Talk to me about the difficulties in balancing that.
I mean, sure. It's I think for as long as I've been in journalism, and even looking back at old tape, sure, I think there's always been this desire to get as many perspectives as possible. Sometimes it's difficult, but we try our best to make sure we're, again, finding different perspectives that can touch on the particular subject. I think it's also trying to find people that you see the man on the street interviews, try to get everyday people, not just spokespeople or politicians or official sound, as we call it. I do think there is this hunger from the audience to get the facts, but also sometimes, and we hear it a lot, is people do want analysis. Well, what does this actually mean for me? Why do I care about this? In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and noise and voices and perspectives, who's going to be the tour guide to help you figure out, okay, what's important? What's information that actually matters? What are some of the implications that maybe I hadn't thought of? So I do think there is an importance to try to find those perspectives that can illustrate maybe a point of view that someone hasn't thought about before. At the same time, it's never been easier to fall into an echo chamber.
Right.
When you're, and I don't mean this as a knock on social media, because I do think their business model really thrives off of engagement. But it's very easy for the algorithm to start putting certain things in your feed that you're going to see time and time again that reflects maybe the worldview that you're already in. Some people are comfortable with that. Personally, I like the idea of being challenged and having different perspectives. So again, hey, I hadn't thought of it that way. Now that I've heard someone from that side of the political spectrum, or maybe that person who's been impacted by this decision or by this natural disaster, or this is happening to them, it's given me another sense of the world, a sense of the reality of what's going on that, again, maybe I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, and I think it changes to consider other perspectives. I think it changes our empathy, right? Our ability to try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and say, okay, even though I might not agree with their standpoint on this issue, I can understand why they came to that conclusion, and I can respect them as a human for having that opinion. I mean, I imagine it's, not only you mentioned gathering different voices, right? Whether it be an official voice or sort of an everyday person voice, there's got to be decisions based around headlines and even what topics we cover, right? I don't know if you're familiar with you probably are, the website allsides.com. It's a news website. Check it out.
Okay.
And it will do analysis of issues, and it'll show you right of center, left of center, more center type.
Sure.
And it'll show you the different headlines. And it's really interesting, right? And I mean, and obviously there's lots of politicians we know. It might say, so-and-so rips into so-and-so, or then it'll say, maybe a softer and more euphemistic way, they'll say so-and-so called for change, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how just the words we use in the headline can totally change the tone of the story.
Words matter. Words are important. And trust me, there's times I fall into that where I'm writing a script and it makes sense in my head, and then when I hear on the air, I'm like, ooh, that might have been a little too much, because we are trying to develop connection and engagement. I mean, we want people to stop and listen and hear what we're saying and hear the information that we're putting out there. So there is that aspect of, I'm sure, breaking news, developing now, a lot of these buzzwords that you'll hear when you watch television. Again, it's trying to get people to pay attention. But you're right. I mean, trying to figure out, okay, is that the right way to characterize what happened? And we do a lot of, as I mentioned, we do a lot of thinking ahead of time, but we also do a good debrief and talk about afterwards. Okay, was that the right tone? Was that the right way to say that? And then try, moving forward to think of those conversations and make decisions in the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's a thoughtful approach. I mean, and it happens so fast, I would imagine, that it's so hard. You mentioned, for example, a tragedy. I mean, as information's, I imagine there's a pressure, a good pressure to want to be on top of the story, ahead of the story as much as possible to serve your customers, your viewers, and of course, have an edge over your competition.
Sure.
But as you said, the tension of wanting to be accurate, that's got to be so difficult to like really lean into and be thoughtful of what do we present now? What do we wait for? It seems difficult.
It's very challenging. And if you go in our control room, there's monitors on the wall. You can see every camera in the studio, and we have some live cameras all over the area. And then on one monitor, you see ABC, CBS, WGN, Fox, us, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, CNN. We're watching the competition constantly. Yeah. And there are those moments where some of the news are like, something's on another channel, and that kind of tips us off to what's going on. Granted, that other newsroom is doing the same exact thing. I mean, we're all watching each other. I do question my mind sometimes. Okay, is the viewer really flipping between Channel 7 got that first?
Right.
Maybe it's not like that.
Yeah.
But there is definitely competition and a camaraderie in the industry between all the different television stations, and we do want to have that edge. And usually our edge is going to be, yes, did we get the story first? Did we get it right? Yeah. Did we present voices that maybe the other station didn't present? Or maybe an angle or some sort of nugget of information that the other station didn't get? But again, I think paramount to all this is accuracy.
Yeah.
I'd rather be late on a story and have gotten it right than have gotten it wrong. And that's happened before where things have rushed, hey, we got to get it out there, and it was not accurate to begin with. So yeah, I think important lessons to be learned from those experiences. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But making sure again, accuracy and facts matter.
Yeah. Well, it all goes into the trust. I mean, that's the most. I mean, in any communication field, right? But particularly, like you said, I would agree with you. I don't think people are necessarily bouncing back and forth. I might do it if there's a major event happening.
Sure.
I'll try to kind of both sides it, particularly if I find something that I think is maybe going to have a slant this way, I'll try to see the other side as well. But I think people are watching you, for example, we're having this conversation, they're watching you because they like you, they trust you, that you're representing and that you're going to give it to them, the information to them in a way that they can trust. That resonates better. So,
and I think it's good to get, as you said, when something big is going on, it's nice to have more information.
Sure.
As I mentioned, it's hard because we are getting a lot of content all the time on your social media feed and on TV. But I think when those stories are happening, it is so important to see what is going on from different perspectives, different news organizations, how they're reporting the story, and then making those, being a good news consumer, making those decisions off of a bunch of information as opposed to just one source.
Yeah. I want to touch on, so you talked about right now, obviously your bread and butter is television broadcasting, right? And I'm somewhat, as a big consumer of media, and a lot of it of newer media, I'm amazed, I think, that broadcast television has continued to remain relevant. I think it is. Where do you, when you look ahead 20, 25 years from now, and I mean, we've seen TV viewership go down, right, because of streaming and things like that. Does the industry then just continue to shift more towards like a streaming type thing? Do you think broadcast television will completely cease at some point?
My crystal ball is it's in the shop today. I wish I had the answers.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, when you look at the trajectory of where linear television is heading, it makes sense to think that, okay, maybe streaming and digital is going to be our future. That said, we're seeing more people using over-the-air rabbit ears to watch TV than we have in the last 10 to 15 years. And people are, that's dead. Everyone's just going to watch cable. Yeah. So I think the way technology moves, the way audiences adapt to that technology, and just the way we continue to develop trust, those are going to be the three key ingredients to what happens down the road. Yeah. So we can control the trust factor. We can control, we can try to present good information and good quality content that will get people to want to watch. The content's going to be there. Yeah. How we deliver it, how we distribute it, it's really anyone's guess at this point. But I do think digital, streaming, podcasting, all these different platforms are going to play a huge role in how we reach our audience. I can't tell you how we're going to monetize it from a business standpoint. I think we're still trying to figure that out. And some things maybe we've been a little late to the game on. But I do know that for us to, kind of like the way newspapers and radio have adapted to this new reality, we're just going to keep pivoting. We're going to keep trying to stay on the leading edge and, again, be there where the audience expects us to be there. Yeah.
Well, and you're right. There's so many avenues, including broadcast. And it's funny you say people using rabbit ears because it's true. Because a lot of people are cutting the cord from cable because it's so expensive. They're like, I don't need 350 channels. I need the few shows that I watch on Netflix, but I want to watch the news. I want to watch the Bears, right? I have seen people go back to the antennas.
People go back, but then sometimes you end up with 5 or 6 different streaming platforms that altogether cost the same as a
exactly right
as a cable subscription. The industry is trying to adapt to that, and they're trying to figure out, okay, do we bundle this all together? Do we kind of create an a la carte system? Yep. So I think you are going to see more consolidation in some cases. We're seeing a bunch of TV station groups are starting to merge together. There's a lot of change in the industry, and with anything, you just have to adapt. You have to be able to ride the wave and, be intentional about the decisions you're making. And again, keeping the audience at your priority, making sure that you're where they need you. And so I do think it'll be interesting to see. We have Peacock. That's our main streaming platform for NBC. Right. We have our news product on there. We have our website that we put our main newscasts on there. But also we do some. What I've really loved is we have more real estate to do long form storytelling. So we'll do documentaries. We'll do kind of in-depth situational, like documentary things that you would see on a cable channel. We can do those now. It's not just the traditional minute 30 story that you see on your 6 o'clock news. So it's given us more latitude.
On that note, I know that a passion of yours is aviation, and I noticed that. I mean, I know that you fly, but also a lot of your Instagram stories are about aviation news, right?
Yeah.
Maybe touch on that. And is there any other like sort of passion area of yours that when you have the opportunity just to do some sort of independent, for fun journalism, is there any other areas that you'd like to dive into?
Yes, flying and aviation has been a love of mine since I was a kid. And funny story, my mom was a flight attendant. She worked for United Airlines before I was born. My dad was an Air Force brat, so my grandfather did maintenance in the Air Force, was also a private pilot. My mom's dad worked for Boeing. He was an engineer on the original 707 and the 727, all those old classic jetliners. And then I had an uncle who, my dad's brother, who was a captain for Alaska Airlines. When I was a kid, he would sneak us into the simulators up in Seattle and teach us how to fly the jets. So I've loved airplanes ever since I was a kid. And when I got to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was really interested in current events and politics. And so political science and journalism was my major, and that's what I wanted to study. But I ended up going to flight school. I was in college, got my private pilot's license, ended up getting my instrument rating. And at that point, the economy was kind of faltering, and airline pilots were getting laid off and furloughed. So I said, let's stick with this journalism route. And so I loved the storytelling. I loved being in the newsroom. I'd follow my dad to work all the time when I was a kid. Yeah. So that was already ingrained inside of me. But eventually, as I started down the journalism path, flying and aviation was a constant, either as a hobby or in the news. I as a reporter, we'd cover a plane crash. I was like, okay, well, I know a little bit about airplanes and flying, and let's talk about the weather, let's talk about fuel, let's talk about, any sort of factor, air traffic control, things like that. So that has really come in handy as a storyteller and as a journalist to have a little bit of that knowledge and expertise. And granted, it's one of those things you're always learning. Every flight, you learn something about yourself, you learn something about the environment, you learn something about the airplane. So I try to take that perspective with my storytelling as well. And so I'd like to do more of that, whether it's, doing stories up in the air in the cockpit. I'm currently working on becoming a flight instructor as well on the side, because I have so much time as a dad and as a as a news anchor. But I'm working on the process of becoming a flight instructor and being able to teach those fundamentals of flight.
That's fantastic. I think people are fascinated. I think the average person just has a fascination with aviation, maybe because it's a little mysterious.
Sure.
And for a lot of people, maybe a little scary, right? And so I think we tend to be interested in things that we're kind of unsure of. So I love watching your things. I'm curious, have you heard of Captain Steve?
Yes.
Oh, I love his stuff
I follow
too.
Captain Steve. He's
great.
great. Yeah. He's great. But you're right. I think he's great because he breaks down a lot of the mystery. When you get to the airport, from the second you get in the Uber to get to O'Hare, you've given up all control.
Yeah.
You're at the whim of the weather, of TSA lines, of airline, maintenance delays and things like that. You've completely given up control, and you're putting trust in your crew in the cockpit or in the cabin. So I do think breaking down some of that mystery of, hey, how does it really work? When you hear those noises on the airplane, what is that?
Right.
When they ring the flight attendant call button, what is that? I think that helps put travelers at ease, breaking down some of that mystery, because it can be a little scary. Sure. And a lot of my Instagram content, I try to acknowledge that, hey, I get it. I know that this is a little nerve-wracking when all of a sudden the plane is coming into land and then you soar back up again. That's a go-around. That's completely normal. This is what pilots train for. I want to break down some of that mystery and make people feel comfortable and safe when they fly, partly because I'm passionate about it, but also because I know so many people in my life who say, hey, I don't like flying. I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to be with friends and family. So trying to break down some of that mystery, try to make it a little more tangible is, I think, makes it better for everyone who travels.
So I want to shift a little bit and kind of have you be introspective, not necessarily related to what we see on camera. Was there a moment in your career that, and it could be, you could take this in many ways, that was like a defining moment, an inflection point that kind of changed the way you went about your business, either it could be on camera, but even maybe just in the newsroom, interacting with people. But it was a point that kind of really shifted how you would operate up to this point in your career.
It's funny, and it wasn't even a professional thing. It was just becoming a dad. I think becoming a parent really changed the way I saw the world and the way I interacted with my colleagues and the way I interacted with the news. There is a heaviness, don't get me wrong, when we cover a lot of bad news. And I think I understood that when I was younger. But after becoming a parent, a lot of these stories started to touch me differently. I'd feel it a lot more. And, I think just having that perspective, when you're talking to somebody in an interview is you're on the same level as them. So I do think that was a defining moment for me. Part of the whole journey is just growing. I look at some of my early stuff when I was first starting as a reporter in West Palm Beach, and some of the things that I was trying out, and the way I would phrase things, and the voice I was trying to present. I was trying to sound older than I actually was, and I was working in South Florida, so there's definitely kind of more of an aggressive, in-your-face news style. And I look back, and I was trying so hard to copy other people. And don't get me wrong, I tell young journalists this all the time. It's like, watch other news anchors and reporters. I mean, that's how you're going to learn, is just by seeing how other people demonstrate the craft. But eventually you hit a point where you've got to be yourself. You have to be truly authentic and use your voice, not somebody else's voice. And don't get me wrong, when I was in my 20s, I had consultants that was like, you need to sound more like this news anchor, or you need to say it this way. I think, again, it was probably around the same time I became a dad. I was like, you know what? I need to do it my way. I need to be authentic, because that's what the audience is expecting. They don't want me to be like my dad. They don't want me to be like Tom Yamas. They don't want me to be like any other anchor. They want me to be myself. And I enjoy being myself a lot more. So that's
I resonate with that. I mean, same answer for me. I mean, becoming a dad. And it takes a while, I mean, for anyone, I think, to find who you are. And that becomes a big part of it, because it's your primary role, right, in life, right? I'm curious. So I have a couple of things I want to ask you about related to that. So, the voice, because I've had the pleasure to meet a lot of people in broadcasting and television, and there is this like broadcasting voice. Now you're like, I'm so pleased, because like you sound like you. I had the opportunity to interview Cisco Cotto from WBBM
absolutely.
News.
Big fan of his.
And his, same for him. His speaking voice in everyday life is his radio voice. But there seems to be, though, for some people, this like broadcasting voice. Like you're watching a baseball game, it's like, bottom nine, Sammy Sosa. It's like,
that's right.
Where does that come from?
I read stories to my kids like that at night. Good evening, Henry and Sam. Our top story is the little engine that could. No,
right.
It's funny. There is that kind of cadence and that rhythm, and again, I think a lot of that is from watching people who did this in the past. I so back to the flying aspect. Airline pilots sometimes have that drawl. Folks from the flight deck, welcome aboard. I started reading this book, The Right Stuff, which became a movie in the 80s. But they talk about Chuck Yeager. Okay. Chuck Yeager was a test pilot in the Air Force back in the 50s, first pilot to fly above the speed of sound, break the sound barrier. And he was this, I think he was from West Virginia, had this very folksy way of talking. And because of all the newsreels and interviews, people heard him speak. They wanted to emulate that. And that became the way pilots started to sound. Folks, I'm going to put the landing gear down, and that sort of thing. And so I think in the news industry, it's the same sort of thing, as we've heard people talk that way in the past. And it's kind of progressed on and on.
The Tom Brokaw.
Correct. It's I think those were people that we looked up to, and we want to sound just like them. But to the point we were making earlier, is I think I kind of hit a point where I'm like, I just need to start sounding like myself. And sure, I mean, there is still that news cadence and that broadcast voice, non-regional diction that we learned in journalism school. But again, just trying to embrace who we truly are, our authentic self.
Yeah. No, I think you do it well.
Thank you.
So you touched on family, right? So I'd love to ask you about your family. You've been married for 13 years? to Morgan?
13 years. That's
Right?
correct. Yeah.
What is one way, and your wife's name is Morgan. Is that
Morgan,
right?
that's correct,
What is
yeah.
one way that Morgan makes you better?
Oh, how much time do we have? In every possible way. I could not do what I do without her, because she has really been my biggest cheerleader, my biggest supporter, really the inspiration of why I do what I do. We started dating when we were in college. We both went to Pepperdine University in Southern California. Her roommate, sophomore year, was my co-anchor at the campus TV station. So that's how we met. And, she's been with me through this entire journey of bouncing from TV station to TV station, market to market, really growing and learning along the way. And I think that's been the best part, is to have a partner in life that really keeps you grounded when so much of the world, as I mentioned, feels like it's going crazy or is falling apart, or you hit the highest of highs. You're telling these great stories and, interviewing celebrities and political leaders. She really keeps me humble and down to earth. And I think just is someone that I can confide in because she knows who I am at my core. I'm not the TV guy. I'm not the anchor man, NBC Stefan Holt. I'm Stefan.
Yeah.
I'm her husband, and she's my wife. And we really enjoy those moments that we can just, kind of take a break from the news, take a break from all the craziness going on, and just be intentional with our kids and really raise them into the, into someday the adults that God has put them on this earth to be. So that's my primary job, is being a husband and a dad, and then also being a newscaster.
So for your boys, when you're gone someday, right? And a lot of people will remember you for what you've done in your career. If there was one thing that you wanted them to remember you for, what would it be?
Oof. One thing. Say, how much time do we have? That's hard, because I really think I love spending time with my kids and my boys, and that's been one of the challenges of this profession and this job, is when breaking news happens, you got to go. But I think, I know it's not one thing, but presence, that I've been there for them. And I think just character, because at the end of the day, I've really wanted to kind of exemplify what it means to have character, what it means to be a strong, person, a resilient person. And, there's times where I've had to make the tough decision of, like, you know what, I'm not going to go into work today because I need to be present with my family. And that's tough sometimes, because professionally, I think, again, there's that call to, hey, it's breaking news, we got to go. We got to, start making calls and trying to figure out those moments where, the career is important. Telling people what's going on in the world is very important. Trust me, we're going to be there when news breaks. We're going to be there when things matter and it's important. But I also need to be there when it matters to my kids and to my family. So trying to figure out that balance.
I think that's hard for every parent.
Sure.
Right?
100%.
And whether you have a career outside the home, or if you're a stay-at-home parent, it's very tricky to balance all those things. But I mean, I think the fact that you're thinking about it is a good thing, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's on my mind every single day.
Yeah, that's good. What's last question here, and then I'm going to kind of move into a lightning round. What's one myth, either about yourself or about your field, that you'd love to dispel for people?
Oh, a myth. I think people think of TV news, they watch it and think, oh, this must be super glamorous, and you're hanging out with celebrities and you're famous, and it's when I come home at night, I'm a tired suburban dad.
Yeah, right.
We're everyday people, and I guess I'd like to dispel the myth that somehow we know everything and have that we're telling you the way the world is. I think, like so many people, we're doing our best to get the information. We're very privileged that we usually get that information first, but it's our responsibility and our job to pass that information along in a responsible and accurate way. So I do think that as glamorous as it may look on TV with the lights and the makeup and the fancy sets, we've got a job to do. It's a calling. I think all of us feel like we've been called to do this, and it's a responsibility that we take very seriously. We have a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. We truly enjoy it, but at the end of the day, we know that this is an important function of society. It's an important function of democracy, and there's people that are counting on us. So we have that at the forefront of our mind when we get to work. But at the end of the day, we're humans. We're everyday people that pay taxes and pay bills and have kids and families, and we want to see their future prosper. And so we're all in this together, I guess.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't make one mention of your dad, Lester Holt. Is there one thing that you've taken from him, either as a father or as a broadcaster, and applied it to your life?
I think it goes back to that point of compassion. Of really trying to put yourselves in the shoes of who you're speaking with in an interview, or when you're covering a story, just try to think about the human scale. It's very easy to get lost in the numbers or the statistics. This many people are affected, or it costs this many millions of dollars. But when you try to shrink that down to, hey, the individual person that's feeling the impact of this story, that right there is the connection that numbers can't provide. It's really dialing into the emotions, dialing into how people are responding to stress, how people are responding to what's going on in the world. So I think that's super important. And there's a couple times, he's been my mentor ever since I got involved in this. And a couple times I'm like, hey, how do I tell this story? How do I stay active in this? And he's really brought me back to the idea of, okay, you got to be compassionate, you got to be personal, you have to respect people, because a lot of times when we are doing a story, we're talking to someone on the worst day of their life. They've just lost someone, they've lost a home, they're feeling the pressure and the gravity of the situation that they're in, and just really being respectful of that. Trust me, I've had doors slammed in my face before, and phones hung up on me, and people say, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, I get it. Yeah. I totally understand. So just having that level of compassion is super important along the way.
Yeah, agree. All right, a little lightning round here. So you live in Naperville, am I correct?
I do,
all right,
yes.
So this is a Naperville podcast. So
oh, boy.
The people, the millions that watch it would be so mad.
The greatest city in America, Naperville, Illinois.
That's right. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So here's my questions about Naperville. Quick questions. Best coffee shop in Naperville?
Oh, man. I'm a big fan of Sparrow Coffee. Yeah. It's just a cool vibe in there. The coffee's good. Yeah, that's our place.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great spot. And you don't have to wait in line around the block for 20 minutes like some of the other places.
I haven't, the place that I think you're referring to, I haven't been there yet, and I don't understand the allure, because I'm like, I don't want to wait in my car for 20 minutes for a cup of coffee.
It seems like a constant social media topic. I haven't tried it, so I'm not throwing any shade, but
okay.
I like to get my coffee in less time.
I'm there with you.
Okay, so what's your favorite, some people struggle with this phrasing, but under the radar lunch spot? I mean, there's places, everybody knows about some places. There are places you kind of, that's like a hole in the wall, or maybe people should know about more?
So lunch and dinner. One of my favorite sushi places is Ikai, downtown Naperville. Yeah. I mean, you could walk by and not realize there's a sushi place there. But man, it's really good food. And we like just hopping in there, sitting at the sushi bar and hanging out. And it's that's one of our favorite spots.
Okay, right on. What's one word you'd use to describe downtown Naperville?
Busy.
Yeah.
It's gotten really busy.
Yeah.
I mean, you go there on a Friday, Saturday night, and it's jamming.
Try driving your car, right? Like, yeah, you wait for the crowds.
It's I talk to I have a lot of colleagues that live in the western suburbs, and they're like, you're so lucky you live in Naperville, because they come here to go shopping, to eat, to hang out. So, it's definitely busy.
I'm going to get this stat wrong, so don't fact check me. When we were at Ramsey's Kitchen, they mentioned that Naperville, it's something like this, is the number 2 entertainment and dining destination in the Midwest.
No way.
Next to Chicago. So I don't know. I don't know how they measure that, right? If that's dollars spent or number of restaurants, whatever it is. But I think a lot of people, especially in my line of work as real estate, the suburbs get this like sleepy, bad name, kind of like, there's nothing to do. And it's like, have you been to downtown Naperville? Yeah.
I was surprised by that. So I grew up in Chicago on the north side, and I remember it was like in the mid-90s, a lot of my friends, their families started moving out to Naperville. And it was still kind of sleepy, a little quiet.
Yeah.
And so that was always the impression I had in my mind. It wasn't until, I came back, I think we moved back in 2020. And my wife's now former boss lived here in Naperville. I was like, come on out, come stay with us. It was during the pandemic, so we were trying to, stay within our cluster, our pod.
Right.
And he's like, come to Naperville. And I was like, Naperville, really? And we spent one weekend and we were like, oh, this place is great. There's a lot of good places to eat and shop. And so we fell in love instantly.
What's one thing that people get wrong about Naperville besides the thinking it's sleepy?
I think one thing that people get wrong. I mean, I go back to the sleepy thing just because I think people think it's small and kind of quaint. A lot of people tell me, like, isn't that far away from downtown Chicago?
Yeah.
And as someone who does drive every single day into the city, it can be a little bit of a cumbersome commute. I do think it's better for people who take Metro, who take the train. It's a little more convenient. If you
Far is relative, right?
Far is relative.
I mean, it's spread. I mean, the Chicagoland region is spreading further west and south and northwest every day.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's really growing. I'm fortunate that, I drive kind of off peak hours.
Yeah.
But the days I do have to go into the city early in the morning during the morning rush hour, I'm like, there's a lot of traffic going inbound.
I'm always surprised when we go, and I think it's not going to be, and it is. What's your favorite annual event in Naperville?
Ooh, favorite annual event. I love the parades. We tend to do the Memorial Day Parade and the Labor Day Parade, and the kids love it too. It's just there's something kind of small town Americana about everyone coming out and watching the people march down the street. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple more. What park in Naperville would you turn into your office if you could?
Ooh, what park? I really like. Granted, got small kids, so we spend a lot of time at the playgrounds.
Yeah.
So that's not the most ideal office, but I like kind of is it Centennial Park over there by the river? I like going along there, and I like the Prairie Preserve too over off the 75th there.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something. It feels like this is the way the landscape used to be years ago.
Yeah.
And it just feels like you're a million miles away from everything else.
It does. It's this big break, and you forget you're in a big metropolitan area. So who is one Napervillian that more people should know that maybe they don't, or they're sort of an unsung hero in town?
Napervillian. I'm going to ask you the same question. Is there someone that you think I should know in Naperville?
Okay. So this might sound too easy. We're sitting in Yellow Box Church.
Sure.
I think Dave Ferguson is an incredible Napervillian that a lot of people do know, but maybe more just in terms of his leadership, how he's grown organizations. I think it's pretty interesting.
I'd agree with that. He's done so much and is just constantly doing new things.
Yeah.
That's been really admirable to watch.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know him. It's
Absolutely.
been great.
Anything that you're involved in upcoming that you want to plug?
Great question. So I do a lot of work with NCTV 17 here in Naperville. They're the community television station serving the city of Naperville and different school districts in 203 and 204. So we have a big event called The Morning Show that's going to be in November. And this is a fun opportunity. I mean, I'm a night side anchor now. So it's nice to do something early in the morning, a little more vibrant and fun. We get a lot of people together in the room, and there's a studio band, and we interview some great guests. It's a way to really showcase what NCTV 17 does. And in a way that in kind of traditional mainstream media, we can't do as well because we have to cover the whole Chicagoland area. I mean, from basically the Wisconsin state line to the Indiana state line, everything in between is our subject area, our coverage area. When you really want to get down to what's going on at the school board, what's going on in the high school athletic field, what's going on in downtown Naperville, they cover it like nobody else can. So I'm proud to support them and help them out. And really, they're a nonprofit TV station. They survive off of people supporting them. So happy to lend my support and help them to grow and continue telling the great stories here in Naperville.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It's such a luxury for us to be able to have that, and we could take it for granted that we have that local reporting. So I do hope people continue to support them. And I unfortunately I can't be there for this year. We're going to be out of town, but I would love to be there. And maybe I'm going to put you on the spot here. Maybe I can get you to be on a Naper Bites episode.
Yeah.
For NCTV one of these upcoming
Sure.
days, and we can break some bread together.
That'd be awesome. Hey, I'm always down for a good meal. So
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Chris, thank you
and
so
sharing
much.
with us. Appreciate it.
this is fun. Thank you.
Stefan.
It's good to see you.
All right, everybody, we'll see you next time on Naperville Real Talk. Thanks to my guest, Stefan Holt, and check out the next episode. Be sure to follow on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get good podcasts. We'll see you again soon.